Let's get the show notes. Morning. Welcome, everybody.
Morning.
Cooperate or compete, I think, and this was all Laura's fault. So yeah, we're going to have to compete with Laura to see whether we can cooperate and get a decent chat going here this morning. So Laura, I'm going to kick off with you, seeing that you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 2 a.m. in the morning, and see where we can take this. So you need to unmute yourself first, because otherwise...
Tim, you want me to start?
Yeah, of course.
So cooperation and competition.
Mm-hmm.
When I taught at Illinois State, I was in an introduction to sociology class, and I love experiential learning. And I facilitated an exercise with the class, and it was musical chairs. Do y'all know what that is? Raise your hand if you know what that is, because okay, I don't know if it's universal. And the traditional way is you go around with the music, it stops, you take out a chair, and the people, and then whoever doesn't get a seat, they're taken out, and you take out a chair. Well, there was a Marine in the first class, or the first round, and he's a big, tough guy and all that, and he was fighting over the chairs with this other guy, and he like fell. It was one of the desks where they were connected to the side and then to the chair, and he fell forward, he broke a finger. There you go for competition. Someone gets hurt. Well, we played it a second time, and the rules were the same, except a chair was taken out each time the music stopped, but a person wasn't. Everybody stayed in. And the rules were that you had to sit on something. You couldn't sit on the desks that were taken off to the side, and you couldn't sit on the floor, and you couldn't sit on my desk or my chair. So with each subsequent time, there's people like straggled around and they found each other's laps. Well, at the end, everybody's still in and there's no chairs. They end up, because of the rules, that they're in a circle and they're sitting on each other's laps. Don't make a joke out of it. But I mean, so it's cooperation. And everybody wins. So if we change the rules, there's no hack on happiness. There's no tap on. There's no. You can't put a limit on joy. You can't put a limit on sharing together. So I understand with competition, there's a little bit of drive and motivation and encouragement. At the same time, if everyone stays in and looks out for each other, then maybe everyone wins. So scarcity of resources, possibly, yeah. Sometimes there's not going to be a lap there for you to sit on. Don't want a lap dance. So we just think there's a time and place for everything. That's all.
All right, great. Thanks, Laura. Yeah. So participation certificates came to mind as you were talking about there. So yeah, Ed, I think we better get across to you next. I know you would love just to get a participation certificate for your ultra marathons.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because in most races, everyone wins because they all get a medal. As long as you finish in the time, you get a medal. So you're really competing against yourself. You're not competing against the guy at the front, because there are only a few people that are going to win, aren't they? But I mean, when I run the London Marathon, I was never going to beat Mo Farah. So but I wanted to do better than I'd done before, and sometimes I want to do better than my mates. So I think there is always that competition element, and I think if you remove that competition element, you remove some of the fun in some ways. In UK schools, they had this whole thing about sport, and it wasn't supposed to be competitive. And you think, well, what's that about? I do think the problem with sport is we focus on only a few sports, and some people excel at it and others are useless at it. I was pretty lousy at cross country running. I always used to come last. I was really good at badminton, but because you tend to have 4 people on a court in badminton and 30 kids in a class, playing rugby is much easier to organise than playing badminton, and leaves less equipment. So you tend not to do those. So you get a whole cohort of children that are used to failing. And when I organised an event in a school one time, in my daughter's primary school, people were invited in just to share their experiences with the children. I had Animal Olympics. So they had to get one of those big Swiss ball things, and then you rolled it with your feet like a dung beetle. And then we had a spider race where you tied people together at the waist and they had to go on all fours, so they had 8 legs. And that was interesting because some of the children that weren't very athletic won that particular race because they worked together. And the other ones who were more whatever, you know, who were more competitive, they kind of didn't cooperate, and one half went off faster than the other half and whatever. And then for the last race of the whole thing, I'd kind of worked out roughly who were the quick guys, who were the slow guys. So I grouped them in 4s, making sure there was a mixture of abilities. And then the final race was a run round the field, but they had to cross the finish line with their group no more than 1 meter apart. And again, it was one of the slowest groups that won because they actually all understood the thing about getting all 4 of their people across the line at the same time. So they had to bring on the slower ones, slow down the faster ones. But I think you do need that competitive element, whether it's competing against yourself, whether it's competing against other people, whether it's 2 teams competing against each other, whether it's a race to, I don't know, wherever, but we all need that competitive element to just push us that little bit extra. But I think we need at the same time to make sure everyone's included. Because I think if you turn around and always have the same sales guy winning the prize every time, it can be demotivating for the other 19 sales guys in your 20-person sales team. So you just got to think about, but then again, you don't want to turn off that really good salesman because he's bringing in most of the money. So I think it's getting that competition right, so that it's, in a way, it gives everyone a bite of the cherry and is aspirational rather than crushing. And I think in sport, in schools, a lot of children get crushed. And we don't bring out the best of them because we've all got different abilities in different ways. I was useless at cricket, but when I went over to America, I was really good at softball. Go figure, because you're catching the ball in your left hand with a ruddy great big glove. And whacking it was a different process of whacking a ball than cricket. And I just loved softball and I was really good at it, but I would have never have thought about that from my cricketing experiences. So I think we need to introduce a lot of variety in the competition we give people and not make it so focused on only certain things. And even in a work environment, we tend to focus on perhaps 1 or 2 measures, you know, maybe sales, maybe customer service stats. If we could focus on other things, then everyone gets a chance of excelling at whatever they're good at. So that's my thoughts.
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, variety is the spice of life. Eh? Yeah. So, Tabitha, you're a soccer coach. Come on, tell us competition is important.
Yes, today I want to talk about the biggest underdog story in football history, you know, and it was in 2015 when Leicester City actually won the league in the Premier League. Now, this was possible, you know, because the odds are like 5,000 to 1. Like, it doesn't happen, you know. Plus, the previous season, the guys were like almost close to relegation, you know. Like, it doesn't happen that Leicester City wins the league the next season. It absolutely doesn't happen, you know. Plus, you know, they played with a bunch of rejects, you know, players like Casper Schmeichel, you know, and Danny Drinkwater. They failed at Manchester United. And, you know, with Casper Schmeichel, you know, his father is like the legendary Peter Schmeichel, you know, and the goalkeeper that Manchester United have ever had, you know. And their striker, Jamie Vardy, wasn't even, you know, a professional player like 3 years ago. So this was, you know. So it shows you that, you know, when we can cooperate, we can actually win. I forgot N'Golo Kante. Sorry, N'Golo Kante was actually in the French league, but the French league was like, nah, man, you're too small for this thing. Like, we don't need you here, so we don't need you. You're not good enough. You're not good enough for a league. So a bunch of rejects. Even like the manager, like Claudio Ranieri, he had never won anything. And so how Leicester won the league with mere spirit. They knew how to allocate their strengths. They played with perfect economy. They never wasted resources. They were well structured. They played with this formation 4-4-2. It was easy. It wasn't like difficult. Claudio Ranieri just picked the most neutral strategy in 4-4-2, and then he just managed from there on, just to put the best players in the best position, and that way we play as a team. It was Sun Tzu's art of war, to know your opponent and to just play on the flanks, just counter-attacking football. It was deceptive, give your opponent the false control, the sense of control, and then just overwhelm, just like kill. They were balanced. They played with perfect economy. I loved Leicester, man. It was, their attacks were like, the blitzkrieg strategy with Hitler, like, overwhelm your your opponent, just strike. It was that. And in the team they had this reject guy, N'Golo Kante. He played as the engine, and Drinkwater was like the passer of the team. He was like the creative guy who would see passes, and Vardy would like play on the shoulders of the opponents, and he would actually score. And the guy who was like the most talented in the team was like Riyad Mahrez. How Leicester played, it was inspiring, man. It was philosophical. It was how they played. They taught you how to live, in a sense that you shouldn't attack when you know you're going to win. The best attack sometimes is just defense. Relax, look at things, use your resources to the best, to the maximum. They beat everyone, and it was because of they had this spirit. They had this togetherness in the team, and it was so awesome. So yeah, I think I'll just end it there. But yeah, Leicester, like, wow, competition, they beat everyone. They're like the best. So yeah, thank you, Ivan.
Thanks, Tabisa. All right, so clearly soccer is a thing. So Jeffrey, let's get across to you.
Yeah, morning everyone. Yes, great. Right, yeah, competitiveness. I pretty much my entire work life have worked for myself. I've never ever actually worked as part of a team. Or in any form of sort of corporate space. So yeah, I suppose that does kind of make me a little bit underqualified to actually comment on working competitively with people. But yeah, I do agree that a certain amount of competition is good. It does ultimately, how shall I say, it does bring out competitive spirit, I suppose. How else do you describe it? But yeah, don't really have an awful lot to comment on that.
Okay, thanks, Jeffrey. All right, so Trevor, I know you hate competition.
Yeah, so I sort of grew up in a competitive environment, and I was probably the most competitive. But the individuals that I actually mixed with were also competitors. But excuse me, out of this topic, what I was thinking of here was the difficulty of getting competitors to actually work together. So just bringing that, and I'm reminded of when we set up, initially set up the Fourways Community Chamber of Commerce. One of the things that I looked to do was to get all of these really competitive small business operators to actually come together and develop the strategy that they wanted to develop. And we put about 10 to 20 people together, Ivan. You'll remember those days. And what you could see was how competitively these people were thinking about their own entities and not thinking about what we were doing was getting them into one boat. And even while we had them in the boat, the funniest thing that I could see in analogy terms was each of them was picking up a different type of paddle or oar or motorboat. None of them could work together. It demonstrated the difficulty that people have, particularly in business. And for me, it comes out of the old competitive days of jumping into surf life-saving boats where you'd have highly competitive people picking up the oars. And if they weren't working together at the same pace, that thing didn't go straight. And that's what tended to happen in business and business networking groups and business chambers. And I must say that these people were so individual that while they were sitting down trying to be strategic, each one was trying to push their own objective with different implements, and that boat got nowhere. So you'll remember that. And I think, you know what, there is a lovely formula. Ed, you'll love this formula. I've talked of it before. Buckminster Fuller, where I really got attracted to this formula was the geodesic dome, Epcot Center in Disney World. That really blew me away. And I did some research on the guy who actually structured that. Buckminster Fuller is his name. And he at the time held the most patents for inventions back then, about 50 odd years ago. No, maybe it was about 30 odd years ago. And he demonstrated that the biggest synergistic relationship between a group of angles from an engineering perspective came with a formula. And that formula was n squared minus n in brackets divided by 2 equals a synergistic relationship. I'll get it there for you, Ed. I see you writing it down, okay? No, Laura. I'm looking at that long list of little letters behind you, PhD, LPC, CFLE. I haven't got a FLE of whatever it means, but yes, you gave it to us. But that formula, what it demonstrated is the power of individuals coming together. And I did a little twist of that in Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur. I used P squared minus P in brackets divided by 2 equals the synergistic, exponential synergistic relationship between individuals. So let me explain that. You bring 10 people together. Yep. You bring 10 people together. I told you, I can only think in 1s, 2s, and 3s, okay? You bring 10 people in a room together. 10 squared is 100, minus the 10 is 90, divided by 2 is 45. What you get, 10 people in a room together, can come up with 45 possible joint ventures, business relationships. And then if you double that, and Laura, this is interesting, you double that to 20 people in the room. So just add 10. 20 squared is, okay, here we go. What, 400 minus
400, yep. Yeah, 380 divided by 2 is 190.
380 is 190. So you add 10 people to that mix, you get 190 potential possible relationships. Now, what I'm busy working with at the moment is when you bring a group of people into, let's say, a boat, 10 people into a boat, the exponential power that comes out of that, I believe, is as close as damn it to the end result of that particular formula. That by adding those people in, you multiply the power and the end result exponentially in terms of that formula. I think this Buckminster Fuller was an absolute genius. And I think the guy who actually twisted his formula was more of a genius times exponential synergy. So I haven't stopped laughing, but I think there is huge collaborative power when people can bring their minds together and they work with a common objective.
Right, Ed, yeah.
Trevor just reminded me of a very good example of cooperation in Cornwall. In Cornwall, we've got a lot of different towns that have their own identity. And in each town, there's like the king drug dealer. And you know, if you're the drug dealer in St. Ives, you don't go into Falmouth because, you know, you step on a guy's toes, you tend to get killed. Well, also in the UK, we have a thing called county lines drug dealing, where people from big cities come into the counties to bring their drugs in. Well, when the guys from up country decided to come into Cornwall, all the individual drug dealers in the towns got together and defeated the county lines gangs. And I think it illustrates that when you have a problem much bigger than you can cope with, you're then prepared to cooperate. And once they've saw off the county lines drug dealers, they went back to their old ways again. But I think it was really interesting in how this disparate group cooperated to beat a bigger enemy. Not that I'm advocating you get into drug dealing, by the way.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's also that scheme, I think it was started in Portugal, where the government started handing out drugs. Ed, I think you might have told us about that one before as well, where they actually eliminated the drug dealers by actually dishing them out for free to the community, but under controlled circumstances. Yeah,
Portugal used to have a really bad drug problem. Then, as you say, they made it free under controlled circumstances. It reduced deaths from overdoses. It reduced crime. And it's been a huge success, but it's not been introduced elsewhere because people think, well, we should be nasty to drug addicts, not nice to drug addicts. But solve a problem, don't have a view.
But what really interests me on your story is that someone obviously knew about this, reported on it, and people were aware of it. Why didn't they just arrest the whole blooming lot and throw them in the chuggy, man?
It's a thing called evidence. Actually, it was a lady at Exeter University, or the University of Exeter, I should say, who did the report about the drug gangs in, and of course she could get information from the drug gangs that the police couldn't get and use because they'd tell her stuff, but it wasn't corroborated, so that they couldn't prosecute.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it is. You know, I've been an individual that competes as an individual very often in my life from a sporting perspective. You know, Ed, you spoke about badminton. I played some fairly decent badminton in the day. Also squash. Both very individualistic sports. You know, singles and badminton. You spoke about doubles, but singles and badminton is highly competitive. But as you say, it's an individual sport, and that makes it interesting when you start bringing in other team members and competing. So competition is an interesting thing, but I think that we've spoken about it before, that old proverb that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go with a group of people. So yeah, the question is, do you want to go fast? Do you want to go far? And I think you know there's so much you can do on your own. You know, Jeffrey spoke about being a solopreneur most of his life. You know, it takes you to a point where, you know, you start hitting the limits of your capacity, limits of your time, limits of your energy, I think. And if you can multiply that with like-minded people, you know, you can take the next step. And I think that's the real key to starting to cooperate. But it's often a challenge, as Trevor indicated, finding people that want to row in the same direction as you. So I think you know, that comes down to leadership, doesn't it? Now the question is leadership a cooperative model or a competitive model? And I think there's been a lot of talk around that over the years in terms of the way leadership models have developed. You know, from the sort of ones that Laura put into the chat box there, and you know, those sort of leaders, I don't think they cooperated too much with anybody. They were pretty competitive and authoritarian. So yeah, you know, if you bring together the right team, you know, what is the role of the leader at the end of the day? It's a facilitation role, isn't it, rather than a dictatorial one, managing the relationship. So yeah, I think they're both very important. So I don't think you can have one without the other. And I don't think you can eliminate, you know, competition, because I think simply by human nature, we are all competitive at some level. You know, this just depends on how we respond to those challenges that approach us. You know, we can either take them head on, or we can shrink away from them. But again, it comes back to the environment that you find yourself in and the people that you're surrounded with. So, you know, I popped that little video into the chat box. If you guys have a chance to look at it, it's quite cute. The Special Olympics 100-meter dash, where you know, they all stopped and helped the person who was coming last and fell down. So yeah, it is interesting how the mindset works when it comes to competition. What? Don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, if I can sort of interject, it's kind of interesting listening to you two guys, or you guys. So there's a couple of you now that have all kind of played some form of competitive, either professional or club sort of levels of sport. And then how, like example, Trevor was probably a bit of an SOB in his day to make sure that he would win in whatever he was going to compete in. Now, now what I find interesting is the fact that, and perhaps this is why I've never really worked in teams, is the fact that when it comes to sport, man, I was always really, really, really crap at it. I found out years later, because of my dyslexic tendencies, kicking, throwing, and catching a ball I was crap at it. I couldn't do it. I remember in primary school when I went to Christian Brothers College there, sport was a really big thing. And then I would just sort of move myself to the furthest end of the field and then sit on my bum, because nobody's going to hit the ball that far. So I'm not going to have to do anything, you know. But yeah, it kind of makes you think that, you know, perhaps a certain amount of competitiveness in one's life is actually good. But I suppose you ultimately have to have the personal tools to be able to do it. And I think that's ultimately what makes us all different. Just my 5 cents worth. Wondering on what you were saying.
No, look, I think it is important. You know, I think we can all excel in some direction. It's finding the direction that you can excel in, and then learning to compete in that. Trevor's putting up pictures of naked men. I mean, really, Trevor, come on, you know, this is just.
That was for Laura.
What are you looking at?
Can you pick Trevor out of that group, Laura?
Pardon me?
Can you pick Trevor out of that group?
Picture him out of the group?
Can you see which one is Trevor?
Yes. Oh, wait, I didn't see that. I have two monitors. I wasn't even looking over here. Oh my God. Okay. Okay. Oh, that looks like.
Control yourself, Laura. Control yourself.
I know, right? Bottom center.
There.
Yeah. No?
No.
To the left.
Yeah,
Bottom left.
Trevor's always thought his nose was quite important, so he's kept it in the line most of his life.
What? I didn't hear you say. Which one?
Right down here.
Bottom right. Oh my gosh. Nice. Swimming? Swimming?
Water polo, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me get rid of it.
All right, good. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so topic, what's today? Today's Thursday. Must be Friday tomorrow, therefore, I assume. Yes, Ed.
I kind of thought of one while watching your screens go across, because one of them says through a different lens. And we talked about that thing in Portugal where people viewed the problem with a different lens and came up with a solution. And I wondered whether we could sort of think about either things that have been looked at in a different lens and led to a solution, or could we think about how we could turn around current problems, view them through a different lens and maybe come up with a different solution? Does that seem to be a goer?
Yeah.
All right, that's good. I like that one. Yeah, lenses are something I enjoy working with.
Well, that's what I thought. Yes, it says a new lens on your screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
but also, yeah, different perspective is something we also use. So yeah, absolutely. Good. All right, fantastic. So yeah, pick up a new lens, look at things from a different perspective, and we'll chat about them tomorrow morning. Otherwise, have a great day further, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Success.
Bye.
Bye.